Thank you so much, Tia. That was beautifully told. Our next teller is Susan Perrow. And Susan's got 30 years of storytelling experience behind her. She wanted me to mention that these days she's writing therapeutic stories. She's got 3 published books in many languages, and she travels the world running seminars on storytelling. And we have her in Mullumbimby today. Her books are for sale at the back desk at the end of the show. But in the meantime, would you please give Susan a warm welcome to our stage? Would you like to use the microphone? There we are. Thank you.
Hello everyone. How lovely to be here. And yes, I have the most privileged occupation. I write stories, behaviour stories, stories for trauma, for children, and it takes me all over the world, something I could never have predicted in my life. But I'm not here to share one of those stories with you. I'm here to share a story that fits with the theme. It's a memory story. It's a story of place and a story of hope. It was a lovely sunny day, a Saturday, back in March 1974. And my husband and I thought, let's go up Maynarm Valley and visit some friends of ours. They were living right up in Nullum Forest, and although still in a banana shed, they were busy building a little house to live in. So let's go up and have a cup of tea, which we did. We headed off in our ute across the many creek crossings along Maynarm Valley, up into Nullum Forest, and found our friends in their banana shed. And they put the kettle on. And while we were sharing tea, it started to rain. Just a few drops at first, but then soon the rain became so heavy it was as if a dam had burst up in the heavens and a vertical wall of water was falling down to earth. And while our friends were busy moving around their little banana shed and putting out pots and pans to catch all the leaks and drops, our thoughts turned to home. Should we leave now, or will we wait till the rain stops? Well, we thought heavy rain like this can't last for too long, so we decided to wait. Anyone lived here in 1974 in March flood? But the rain didn't ease up, and it was about 5 o'clock, and at this point our friends had got out a big piece of plastic to cover their bed to protect it and keep it dry. And my husband and I looked at each other, knowing that was the only bed in the shed, and thinking, probably time to head home. So we made a dash for our car, drove down the hill, and that vertical wall of water seemed to have turned very quickly into a horizontal wall of water, and it was coming down. Even the first causeway was absolutely impassable. So we turned the ute around, back up to the banana shed, and yes, we ended up staying that night, all 4 of us under the plastic sheet in the double bed in the banana shed. By the way, this story is called A Cup of Tea, a Banana Shed and a Moonstone Bracelet. I meant to say that at the beginning, but I'll come back to where we are. It rained all that night, all the next day, all the next night. the next day, the next night, the next day, the next night, the next day. 7 days we spent up in that banana shed. Fortunately, our friends had the foresight to be stocked up with some dried foods, and we lived on oatmeal porridge and rice and tins of beans. We did try a few times to get out on the forest roads, even tried the road to Yukai. But at this point, our car got stuck so deep in the mud. And with our only set of clothes that we'd arrived in many days before, we were determined not to get them muddy, so it would have been a very interesting sight because the two of us, totally naked, somehow got that car out of the mud. Interesting these days how many pictures you'd have on your digital cameras, but this just lives in the memory. Now, we had a little radio that we kept listening to. We huddled around it in the night and in the mornings. And we were hearing that this very severe weather system, the worst in 100 years, they were pronouncing it on the radio, had done the most damage in Lismore. In fact, not only had the river come up and flooded into the main streets, it was now lapping into the second floor of the buildings. And this was of particular interest to us because my husband was a jeweller and we had rented a little shop in one of the main streets of Lismore, and he was busy working there doing jewellery repair work. And on his workbench, he had, well, we calculated probably $40,000 worth of jewellery that was sitting in containers waiting to be fixed. Diamond rings, bracelets, brooches, pearl necklaces, all kinds of jewellery. And we were hearing on the radio that the force of the water was actually causing some of the shop windows to break, and out into the streets was floating furniture, toys, books, jewellery. We didn't know. The shop that we had been renting actually was a corner shop. It had huge plate glass windows on two sides. So we had it all worked out that we had a double chance of such a thing happening. But we're still up in the banana shed. And finally, on the 7th day, the sun started to shine. The creeks went down, and we were able to get down the valley, across about 11 crossings. The final one where the bridge is, we couldn't get over, but we did what all the other main arm residents were doing at the time. We left our ute and we roped ourselves across the bridge. And while the other main arm residents were heading into Mullumbimby, probably to stock up on supplies, we hitchhiked to Lismore. Took quite a few hours, and we eventually reached the edge of the town and we waded in through the mud. We got to our street, we started passing shops. Some of the shop windows had remained intact, some of them had completely busted apart, and the shops were filled with mud and mess. We kept walking. Eventually, we got to our corner. And miracle of miracles, both our huge glass windows had remained intact. We looked through the glass, and there, in the mud, on the floor, were all the little yellow plastic containers carrying all the pieces of jewellery that fortunately my husband had always very tidily put in their containers each night. And it seemed that the water had seeped in under the door. The shop had filled with water. Everything had floated high up, bobbed about, and then slowly come back down. Those little yellow plastic containers were very quickly given a new name. They were called the golden lifeboats. We unlocked the door, pushed through into the mud, and of course there was a very big clean-up. It took us days and days to sort out all of that mess and mud. But that $40,000 worth of jewellery, because were we insured? No. We didn't believe in such things back then. And I even wonder, even if we did, on the kind of budget we lived on, would we have even afforded it? But what a miracle. There was, however, once everything was sorted, there was one thing missing. My grandmother's moonstone bracelet. Fortunately, she smilingly accepted the fate of the bracelet, but we do wonder, had it slipped out under the door? Had we even hosed it out into the mud? Had it found its way into the river? Had it reached down to the sea? If any of you here were living on the North Coast back then, maybe you wandered the beach. Maybe you found a treasure lying in the sand. If you know anything about the whereabouts of that moonstone bracelet, please come and see me after the show.
Thank you so much, Susan. I'll try and do this without the rostrum now. In Radio Land, they call it back announcing. I apologise for not saying that that was called a cup of tea, a banana shed, and a moonstone bracelet. So that's after the event, but thanks so much, Susan. For our final treat this afternoon, it's a great pleasure to introduce Frank Mills. I guess there's a lot of people in the audience that know Frank's story. He's a historian. He's formerly a farmer and he's formerly a fire chief. He's published several historical books. And Frank has been telling stories about this region pretty much all his life. Malcolm Price will be in conversation with Frank today. And Malcolm, I've heard, is the engine of creative Mullumbimby. That's his claim to fame, amongst many other things. But apparently Frank's not that comfortable with the concept of PowerPoint, and so what we've got today is we've got Malcolm taking the place of what you might imagine PowerPoint to be. He's going to effectively put the slides up and allow the conversation to flow from there. So I welcome these two guys up to entertain you for about half an hour.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Let's sit here.
Yeah, you can sit up there. Thanks, Malcolm.